The Frasier reboot introduced Nicholas Lyndhurst's Alan Cornwall as Dr. Crane's longtime best friend. So where was he in the previous two shows? The new series sees Frasier returning to Boston for his third act after his father Martin has passed away. He hoped to reconnect with his estranged son Freddie, so he bought Freddie's apartment building and moved into the apartment across the hall from his. But Freddie isn't the only old acquaintance with whom Frasier reconnected upon his return to Boston. The first episode of the revival saw Frasier giving a guest lecture at Harvard University as a favor to Alan, his classmate from his time at Oxford. Frasier ended up taking a professorship at Harvard and sharing an office with Alan. Alan has supposedly been one of Frasier's closest friends since they went to college, but he was never seen throughout the entire run of Cheers or the entire run of the original Frasier series. So where was he during all that time? Alan was likely teaching at Harvard during both Cheers and Frasier. It's established that he's been at Harvard for a long time. Alan Cornwall, Nicholas Lyndhurst, and Frasier Making Peace in Frasier, 2023, Season 2 Episode 1 Image via Paramount+. It's established that Alan has been teaching at Harvard for a long time, so long that he has tenure. Alan is shown to be disillusioned with teaching, but he's so grandfathered in that the university can't get rid of him. This is a time-worn comic archetype, the tenured professor who's been teaching for so long and whose job is so safe that he barely puts in any effort anymore. This means that Alan was probably teaching at Harvard throughout Frasier's entire run on television. It would certainly make sense that Alan was busy teaching at Harvard during Frasier's original run, because the original show was set in Seattle. If Alan was tied to a demanding job in Boston, it would make sense that he never made it out to Seattle to visit his old college friend. It would make less sense if Alan was teaching at Harvard during Cheers' Boston set run. Alan may have been teaching at a different university somewhere else in the country during Cheers, or it wouldn't make sense for Frasier and Alan to never see each other during that time. Why wasn't Alan mentioned in Cheers or Frasier? Is it a plot hole? The real-world explanation is that he hadn't been created yet. The short answer is that yes, Alan's absence from Cheers and the original Frasier series is a plot hole. It's strange that Frasier and Alan have supposedly been best friends for 40 years, and yet Frasier didn't mention Alan once in 20 seasons of television. Of course, the real-world reason for that is because Alan hadn't been created yet. There's no official in-universe explanation for why Frasier failed to mention Alan for 2 decades, but it could just be that that's how life goes sometimes. Since sitcoms have recurring cast members, they tend to stay in each other's lives. The 6 friends in Friends saw each other every single day for a decade. But that's not the way it works in real life. In real life, people come in and out of each other's lives. 2 people could be best friends for years, then one of them moves away for a job, and they don't speak for a decade. Frasier and Alan were close at Oxford, then they led separate lives for a few decades, and now, fate has brought them back together. Why Frasier's reboot introduced Alan when he wasn't in Cheers or Frasier? Frasier needed a sidekick in Niall's absence. Alan Cornwall, Nicholas Lyndhurst, and Frasier Crane, Kelsey Grammer, sitting next to each other, both looking angry in Frasier, 2023, Season 2 Episode 1 Image via Paramount+. So, why did the Frasier reboot bother to introduce a character whose very existence creates a plot hole within the 2 previous shows? It's because the writers needed to have that type of character for Frasier to play off. Frasier and Alan's long history might not make sense in the context of the larger Cheers cinematic universe, but it does make sense for the story of the reboot, which sees Frasier going back to his roots. If David Hyde Pierce had agreed to play Niles in the reboot, then the reboot wouldn't need Alan. Alan essentially fills that role. The genius of Niles' role in the original Frasier series is that he gave Frasier an even Frasierer version of himself to bounce off. In Cheers, Frasier's stuffy intellectualism was contrasted with Sam Malone's everyman charms. In the initial Frasier spin-off, the writers introduced an even stuffier intellectual, Frasier's snooty brother, to make Frasier seem like more of a Sam-esque everyman by comparison. That's the role that Alan plays in the Frasier reboot.